Hi, everybody. I hope I'm doing this correctly. This is my first time recording a class on my own on Zoom. So hopefully this works out. Um, I'm going to go over the residential sales contract for PAAR. So the PAAR contract is what we'll be going over in this episode of Contracts 101. And let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. And I believe I can here. Okay. Now I have to go over here. Hopefully this is correct and you guys can see this. So here is the residential sales contract. We're just going to kind of go through this together from the beginning to the end. So right off the bat, the very first box here is only going to be used if you're a dual agent, meaning that you are representing both the buyer and the seller in the transaction. So it's your listing, and then a buyer came through and made an offer with you at your listing. So you'd be representing both. Your name would go right here. I'll type in my name, except that I can't type. I have my computer up on a platform here. I didn't think about that. So that's the licensee, and you're going to have the buyer and the seller both initial here and here. If you have two buyers, if you have two sellers. The next part of the contract is kind of your basic information that you'll get off of either the website for the county or hopefully from the MLS sheet if it's listed in this area. So you're going to put the address, the way the address is 123 Main Street, Peoria, Illinois, 61602. I just made that up. I don't believe there actually is one, a 123 Main. And then the legal description. So I actually wrote those backwards. Sorry. I'm going to change that right now. So the legal description is actually down here. I don't know why I did that here. So this is actually your parcel ID number. So your tax ID number. And I am seriously making this up. So it's definitely not correct. And this down here is legally described as, that's your legal description. So let's just say it's like lot 2 or 3 Gerard subdivision, which is also not a real place. I did not spell that correctly. Then it is your county. So Peoria County in this situation. It could be Tazewell County, Woodford County, wherever. And then the lot size, which you should be able to get off of either the county website or the MLS sheet. And zoning classification of residential. Then the next section is all about the offer acceptance time. So every offer has to have an expiration date, meaning that they have to either respond or that offer does expire. So we're going to give them until today at 6 p.m. So let's say we were doing it in the morning, we're giving them until 6 p.m. to respond. In this hot market, we are giving less and less time for response unless they say, we're going to look at all offers on Monday, then we would make that, whatever works. But that is the time that they need to give us a response by. And then the purchase price. This is pretty obvious that it's just the price that you're willing to pay for the home. So I put on here $200,000. And then the earnest money comes after that. And it is typically 1% of the purchase price. So that's why I made that $2,000. That's not always what it is, especially in this market. Sometimes we're going a little bit above that just to show that the buyers do have a lot of skin in the game. So I would not recommend going too far above because you are risking that as earnest money can only be returned to either the buyer or the seller if both parties agree. So even if, say, I, as a managing broker, 100% agree that the buyer should get their earnest money back, and it seems pretty obvious to me in the contract, the way that they got out of the contract was contractual, in my opinion. I do not have the right to make that decision and just award it to the buyer. They're going to have to get an attorney if the seller says they will not agree to return it. So it is risky. So I don't want to see anyone going out and going crazy and, putting $20,000 of earnest money down, because more than likely it'll be fine. But the day that it's not, it's going to be a problem. Then it's who is holding that earnest money. So in this situation, I put the title company. So if you have the title company, say Innovation Title is holding it, then they would make that earnest money out to Innovation Title. And as you all know, I'm sure the earnest money does, the check gets cashed. If it's a check, it can be a check or a money order, and it will get cashed, and then it will be held until the day of closing. So if it's at the title company, they're going to hold it. If one of the two brokerages hold it, that would either be the listing brokerage or the selling company, meaning the buyer's agent's brokerage. A lot of the brokerages right now are not holding earnest money, so that's why I went ahead and put title company down. And then you have your method of payment. That's how they're paying for the house. So it's either going to be, first I should say, we have owner occupied or non-owner occupied. Non-owner occupied is going to mean that it is a landlord, or maybe somebody's buying it for their daughter. They're not going to be the ones living there, but it's going to be titled in their name. Then it's going to be non-owner occupied. If I am buying a house and I am going to live in that house, that's owner occupied. And then how are they paying for it? It's either going to be cash or financed. So you've got your financed up here. If you're going to have it financed, we do have a financing amendment that will come a little bit later in the contract and show you how to fill that out. Or it could be cash. If it's going to be cash, you're going to want to see you're going to want to provide the seller with a proof of funds. So if you are submitting this offer without a proof of funds, which I would highly recommend that you not do that in this market, but let's just say that they can't get their proof of funds till tomorrow, you would put on there within 1 day, within 2 days. I would definitely not recommend putting any more than 3 days ever, no matter what kind of market we're in, because you don't want a house to go pending and then find out that they really don't have the funds that they think that they have. So it basically says that it will either come with it, or you have this many days in order to present the seller with that proof of funds. If it is cash, it does ask you here if the closing fee shall be paid by the seller or the buyer or divided. That is not all the closing costs. People get very confused there and think that it's all closing costs. The closing fee, I believe, is $250. It might be up to $300 now, but it's just a fee that can either be divided. Most of the time it's divided evenly, but there will still be closing costs for the buyer and there's closing costs for the seller. So it does not mean all closing costs. And I've had a few buyers that got confused with that and said, no, I thought the seller was paying for all the closing costs. All they're paying for is that closing fee. And then you have your closing date. So you're going to want to pick out your date. Depending on if it's cash, you can usually close within 10 days. If it is financing, like conventional financing, usually within 30 days. Sometimes if there's certain grants, or if it's FHA or a VA, they'll ask for 42 days. So it kind of just depends on your lender at that point in time. And then, of course, talk to your buyer about making sure they're not going to be out of town that week or anything like that. So go through your calendar, pick a date that is reasonable, and then that is the date that you're proposing to the seller to close on. And then you've got your possession. I don't believe I've ever done a post-closing possession. 99% of the time you're going to do possession at closing, which means they're going to get the keys at the closing table. And if there is some sort of an arrangement where they do a post-closing possession, you're going to put that date right here. And it does automatically say noon is what's filled in there. So if it's going to be a different time, you'll want to cross that out and write the new time, like 5 p.m. or whatever it's going to be on that day. The buyers will initial and the sellers will initial if they agree. Page 2. Page 2 is really an important page. So we're going to go over that a little bit closely, especially starting with what comes with the house. So what comes with the house, we already have a lot of things written in here, such as TV wall mounts, awnings, things that have been added over the years. If there is a water softener, we'd like to know, is it leased or is it owned, or is there not one? If there's not one, you're going to click that NA. Propane tank, not too many have propane tanks, but out in the country you do have them. Again, sometimes they're leased and sometimes they are owned. You're going to want to know that so that the buyer knows whether they're going to have to also pay to have it leased or not. Now, let's say water softener. Let's say that a buyer does want to keep that, and they may, of course, want to know if it's leased, how much that is a month. So you might ask the seller and they say it's $28 a month through Culligan. And then they say, oh, I do want that. You're going to mark that right here, leased. So you're expecting it to stay at the house. You understand that it's leased and you're willing to switch the lease over into their name. And then you're going to put in here whatever's coming with the house as far as like appliances go. So I've got in here refrigerator, stove, oven, microwave, dishwasher, deep freezer in the basement. Always remember those basement ones because sometimes a buyer thinks they're getting them. And if you don't actually put which ones you're asking for, then they may miss that. So if there's an extra fridge in the garage that they want, put on there refrigerator in the kitchen and refrigerator in the garage. Washer, dryer. Let's say that the seller has already said that they are going to, that there's something that's excluded from the contract that they're taking with them. A lot of times it's a play set that's out in the backyard or something like that. I put Ring doorbell here because I've seen that come up a few times. The Ring doorbell is actually something that will stay with the house if it's not addressed. But if you have a seller that says, I'm taking my Ring doorbell with me, make sure that that's on the contract as excluded so that then the buyer and seller both know it's not going to be there at the final walkthrough. So anything that's excluded would go here. And then these two questions, a lot of times people get all of this mixed up because there's so much going on here. So your first question is, did the buyer go through the house personally? Did they walk through the house with you, or are they buying the sight unseen? Now, if you have a husband that's here searching for a house, but the wife works in Minnesota and she can't come with him, you're going to have a buyer that's signing up here and a buyer that's initialing here, not signing, but initialing. So one is waiving the opportunity to personally inspect the property, but they're still going to buy it. And the other one is saying, yes, they did get a chance to walk through the premises. So if you're doing a FaceTime with them and they are not seeing the property, then they are waiving it. So they would both be initialing up here. They're initialing one or the other. They either did go through the property or they did not. And then the buyer is accepting the premises in these conditions. So your buyers are going to initial one of these two, and then they're going to initial one of these four. So there's four different ways. This is as is with no inspections. So you are not getting any inspections. You're not going to order inspections. Now, the only one that does not apply to is the wood infestation inspection, otherwise known as a termite inspection. That is actually built into our contract that they allow that. So it's not included in this as is. However, the as is condition would mean you're not getting any other inspections. You're not getting a radon inspection. You're not doing a mold inspection. You're not doing your whole house inspection. And then there's as is with inspections. So the way this reads is you are purchasing the home and you are getting inspections done. And that can be any type of inspection. If they have a pool, you can do a pool inspection, a fireplace inspection, a radon inspection. You're planning on getting inspections. However, you are not planning on submitting a repair amendment unless there is significant enough problems to do so. And they put a dollar amount on there so we know what that means. And they're saying $2,500. So $2,500 worth of problems or defects, I would say, not really problems, but defects. They do have to be contractual items. So they do list those, and it also does not include the wood infestation. But let's say that you have a septic issue that is going to require $1,100 worth of stuff. And then you have an electrical box that needs to be rewired, and that's another, $2,000. Well, you've now gone up over the 2,500, so you would be able or allowed to submit a repair amendment to the seller stating, if we don't have the septic fixed and this electrical box fixed, which do exceed the $2,500, then we do have the right to walk away. So you can submit a repair amendment. Now, you, as the buyer's agent, do have to supply the estimates. So if you have a buyer signing here, you better get those inspections done right away, because it can take a bit to get some estimates. You do not want to wait till the 13th day to do your inspection and then find out, oh, I need to get all these estimates and have them in by tomorrow. So I would suggest that you have those inspections done within, at the maximum, 10 days, so that you have a few days to pull together some estimates to supply the seller with those estimates. Now, that does not mean that the seller has to fix them or that they have to go with the people that you got estimates from. At that point in time, it does become a negotiation. However, if you don't have $2,500 worth of items, then you don't have the right to even submit that repair amendment or estimates to them. So if you only have, say, $2,300 worth of items, then you're not submitting it. Basically, the buyer is saying, I will purchase the property unless it's more than $2,500. The idea behind this is, I'm not asking the seller to do anything unless there's a major problem that I am unaware of that will cause me to change my mind, is basically the gist of it. And then there's limited warranties. Now, they took out the fact that this said with inspections. And the reason they did is because they wanted everyone to know that you have limited warranties, whether you do get inspections or do not get inspections. But a lot of times people get confused and say, wait, can I have inspections with these? Yes, you can, as long as the seller agrees to it. So you can ask for inspections and you can submit a repair amendment, even if there's only $60 worth of items, as long as they're contractual items. So it does go through and explain some of the contractual items here. I don't have my glasses on right now. Sorry about that. I just lost so it has to be something in the plumbing, well, septic, heating, electrical, air conditioning. I know that they have all those on the repair amendment. They have everything on there. So it also means, the fact that it's warranted also means not just that you're allowed to get inspections and that you're allowed to submit a repair amendment and request that things be repaired, but it also means that the day of possession, all these items should be in working order unless the seller says right here that they are not warranting them. So you'll see a lot of times, you'll see sellers come back with appliances not warranted. What that means is the day of closing, you go to the house and the dishwasher's not working. They are not warranted, meaning you cannot call the seller and say, hey, this dishwasher's not working. Now we are expecting the plumbing to still be working, the electrical to still be working on the day of closing. But if they put on here appliances, then we're not covering the appliances at that time. But this can be very confusing. So please call me if you have any questions between those three. And then this is only for new construction. So there is a new construction amendment that would go with it, but it's a little different warranty because new construction does come with a year warranty of its own. And then we have exactly what I was talking about, that they do have the right to have a wood infestation inspection and report. And that's just built into the contract. So it's not a yes or no. It's everyone has that right to have that inspection done. This is basically saying that the seller does need to keep the property insured until closing, and the evidence of title. Of course, they are going to do a title search and make sure that there are no liens on the property. This also talks about taxes and assessment in Illinois, just in case you're not familiar with the fact that in Illinois, we pay our taxes the year after. So therefore, right now it's April of 2022, and we have not even paid 2021's taxes yet. They will be due in May in some counties, June in other counties. and usually September of this year. They usually do 2 installments. So the fact that if someone's selling a house today, then they would owe that new buyer all of 2021 because we haven't paid them yet. They'll be due here in 2022. And then 2022 from January 1st through today. So through April 25th of 2022. So they will prorate those taxes based on the last tax bill because they don't know what the new tax bill will be. And then they give that buyer credit for all of the time that the sellers own the house so that they don't have to go find the seller when their taxes come due next year. And then the buyer is responsible for that entire tax bill when the taxes do come due. If you have any questions about that, please let me know that as well. These proration fees would be a situation of having like a monthly or even an annual fee. One would be an HOA fee. So if there's a condo association, they may pay every month into the condo association. Some HOAs just have an annual fee. So I know like Lake Camelot has, I think, an $800 or $700 a year fee. So you're just going to put that down, and either it's for the year or for the quarter or for the month. Also, this would be where you would put if you are purchasing an investment property or your buyer's purchasing one and they have renters in it. You would say that I would put security deposit and monthly rent. So that way they will also prorate that to the day of possession so that there's nothing unfair. The seller gets for all the time that they own the house, and the buyer gets paid for any of the time that they own the house. So anything like that. Also, propane tank rental, you would put that in there. Then it talks about default. So if someone defaults in the contract, and that can be any part of this contract that they are in default, if they don't turn in the earnest money on time, if they don't have loan commitment on time, then this just basically tells you exactly what to do if the other party defaults and how much time you have to send that. So you can send like a default letter. Sometimes it requires an attorney to help you out. If someone does default in the contract, do consult your managing broker to make sure that you understand. But this does spell out some time frames for you there and some notices, how you would notify the other party of the default. Everything is in writing. Anything contractual is in writing. So don't ever just make a phone call and say, oh, I did notify them. It does need to be in writing. And then performance talks about for everything that we have in this contract, of course, it has an expiration date. So you only have, let's say, 14 days to get your repair amendment turned in if you're going to submit a repair amendment. So this is talking about if it would fall on a Saturday or a Sunday or a state or federal holiday, it is extended to the next business day. Now, that does not mean that we don't count Saturdays and Sundays or holidays. So if you say, let's just say you accept an offer on a Thursday, it's going to be due 2 Thursdays later. So if you look at the calendar, not next Thursday, but the Thursday after is when your 14th day is. Now, there might have been a holiday in between that, and we just had Easter. You might have Memorial Day. There might have been a holiday in between, but that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about if that 14th day would fall on Memorial Day, it would actually take it to Tuesday, the next day. But the fact that there might be a Memorial Day in the middle of that 14 days does not matter. It's the same with the weekend. So if it falls on the weekend, it goes to Monday. If there's a Monday holiday, it goes to Tuesday. I think we talked a little bit about the earnest money distribution and how that works. If there is someone who requests it back, that it does have to be both parties do have to show written consent, which that's why we have a cancellation of sales contract that does show that where the earnest money would be going and how much it is. Pre-closing walkthrough basically just means you have the right to do a final walkthrough is what we call it. And it should be within 5 days of closing. I personally like to do it the day before, maybe 2 days before. I don't like to give too much time because the idea behind it is that we're making sure that the property is in the same condition it was when we wrote the offer. And so I wouldn't want there to be too much time to go by because you never know what's happening to a property in the meantime. RESPA is Mainly saying that you do have to be honest with your lender. If you go over here to page 4, this is super self-explanatory. You either did receive a copy of their disclosures, which in our MLS, we have to have them in the MLS in order to start a listing. So there should never be a problem getting one, but maybe you have a FSBO that you're selling, a buyer is buying, and they do not have them filled out yet, then you would have them initial B and give them maybe 2-3 days to get that back. So then if they do disclose something that the buyer did not know, then the buyer does have the right to terminate the contract. Most of the time, you're going to be initialing A because we will have those disclosures on hand when they write an offer. The same with lead-based paint, radon. This here is where you're going to disclose if you are related to either the buyer or the seller, or if the seller is related to their agent, they will be disclosing it here. So everyone would initial that they understand that. Every page is initial, in case I forgot to say, by the buyer and the seller. This page here is all the questions. This is all the amendments. So all of these are, I will purchase this home for $200,000 if. These are all the ifs. If it appraises, if there's nothing major in the buyer's inspection, if the condo association will accept my buyer, if the financing goes through, if the seller will provide a home warranty, if the lead-based paint testing comes out okay, if there's not a mold issue that you don't fix, if you do the new construction amendment, if the radon test isn't too high, and or if you mitigate it. Repair amendment. Now, this repair amendment on this page is not the same as the 14-day repair amendment. This is called an initial repair amendment. It's a good idea to do it if you see something right away that you know that the buyer is going to ask to be fixed. Especially like maybe there's some doors that don't shut correctly, or you see broken glass window and the buyer says, well, gosh, well, they have to fix that. Then I would say, let's write it up now. Let's not wait for a home inspector to say, hey, did you notice this broken glass? Because those are items you should have noticed when you walked through the home. So it's basically, I would pay $200,000 for this house if you repair that front window that has a big crack in it. And there is an amendment that you would fill out. So for every one of these yeses, there's an amendment that goes with it. Subject to sale, subject to closing, a survey, a well and septic inspection. This here is if you have an additional amendment. So the additional amendment may be relocation documents. It might be an amendment that you have drawn up by an attorney that we do not provide. But this is not where you put additional inspections. This is an additional amendment. The inspections, if you have additional inspections, that's actually addressed on the buyer's inspection amendment. So we'll go through those amendments here shortly. This page here is basically where we're putting all the information for the buyers. Do make sure that that is filled out, except for facsimile. That is a fax number, and very few buyers have a fax number. So you don't need to worry about that. This is where the seller will respond. So this is actually signed by the buyer. It is dated and timed because that can be important, especially in a multiple offer situation. Then if the seller is accepting the offer exactly as written and there's no changes, they would mark this A, and then they would sign here and they would fill out all of this information just like the buyer did. If they are countering, they're going to mark B. And then what are they countering? Are they just countering the price? Are they counting the price and some things on page 2 that they don't want to leave behind? If so, then you're going to put the line number of page 2 of the contract. So whatever you're countering, you're going to spell it out so that they know exactly what the counter is. And then this is often ignored, but this is your time. Just like there was a time for the buyer to ask for a response, this is the time that the seller's asking for the buyer to respond to their counteroffer. So say that might be tomorrow morning, we'll say at 10 o'clock. And so don't forget that. That's easy to forget. Then let's just say that the buyer rejects the counteroffer and you guys cannot work it out, this would be where, oh, sorry, this is where they accepted the rejections on the next one. This would be if the buyer accepted the counteroffer the way they wrote it, then they would sign here, date and time again. Then on the next page, we have all of our information as a buyer's agent. If there is an attorney, that's where that goes. The selling company would be Keller Williams Revolution, our license number, your name, your license number, and then email address. If you're on a team, this is how the team works. Is you're the buyer's agent, so you're the agent, your license number goes here. Let's say you're on Seth Couilliard's team. Seth Couilliard's name goes here and his license number here. So the team lead is the rainmaker. And then you have your sellers, all the same information over here. This is where the rejection is. So if the seller is just rejecting an offer, let's say, especially with multiple offers, that you usually have a couple you're rejecting and one you're choosing. So you're going to sign the rejection here. And if the buyer is rejecting a counteroffer, this is where the buyer would sign to reject the counteroffer. Again, initials and initials. Now we're getting to those amendments. So the first one is the finance amendment. And so if they're getting a loan, then that's marked yes on page 5, and you're filling out a finance amendment. So right away we have the address, and then we have the loan commitment. So the loan commitment is mainly for the lender. The lender needs to have the loan all worked out within a certain amount of time. So if we're closing, I think I put April 29th on here, which of course cannot be done, but April 29th, I would expect the lender to have that loan done by the 25th. I usually do it back about 4 to 5 days. They have to have it done 3 days for the TRID law, but I would expect it to be 4 or 5. You can always ask for an extension if that doesn't happen. I wouldn't go too much earlier than that because very few lenders have them done like 7 days before. So this here is just giving them time, a kind of a time frame to expect the loan to be all completely clear to close. And you'll hear a lot of people say, are we clear to close? Are we clear to close? That's what that means, is clear to close. Is it owner occupied, non-owner occupied? I know we filled that out on the front page, but again, they're asking for it on the finance amendment. And then there's a pre-qual letter. The pre-qual is what most people have. So when you have a pre-approval, everyone thinks it's this one here. It's actually this one. It's actually a pre-qualification letter, basically saying if everything you've told me is true, you would qualify for this loan. An underwritten credit approval means that they have gone through the underwriting process. Just about the only time I've seen a buyer have this is if they have lost a house after going through the entire process. So if they have gone through everything, they have verified their employment, they've verified all their tax records, all their bank statements, everything, and then for whatever reason the house falls through and they can't get that house, they would then have an underwritten credit approval because they've gone through the whole system. It's just that for whatever reason that fell through and now they're ready to move on to the next house and they've pretty much done all their parts. So that would be about the only time you have this one. This here is kind of just slipped in here, but it's a pretty important one. It's definitely really important to look at when you have a seller, because you look at that front page said that I was willing to pay $200,000 for the house. But what if I'm asking for $3,000 back in closing costs? Really, that seller is only getting $197,000 for that house, because whatever you're asking for back, they're of course just giving it back at closing. So this is to cover the closing costs, the prepaids that are allowed by the lender, and different lenders do allow different types of prepaids. So you definitely, as a buyer's agent, you don't want this to be too high. Check with your lender, because let's say that we put in $3,000 of closing costs and we negotiate this offer. Then what if we only use $1,000? I kind of just lost $2,000 as a buyer because I could have got the price down a couple $1,000s. If you can see the way it's written, it says seller agrees to pay up to. So if they can't use 3,000, then they're not going to pay 3,000. If they can only use $1,000, if that lender only allows $1,000 of those prepaids and buyer's costs to be used, then $2,000 the seller just gets to pocket and the buyer doesn't get that back in any way. So the way it's written is you want to be careful and check with your lenders and see if your buyer is going to need that many closing costs. And then on the listing side, you really want to check that every time before you present an offer to make sure you know how much they are going to be asking for back, or if they're going to be asking for zero. I go a step further. They haven't done it in the contract yet. I go a step further. When I have the seller, I actually have them initial right here. I just add an initial because I want to make sure that they're very clear about this number, because they tend to look back at page 1 and say, oh yeah, I forgot they're paying me 200,000 for that house. And they forget it's really only 197 because of that $3,000 there. And then this here is basically talking about the lenders can request different types of repairs that are not requested by the buyer, but they're requested by the lender. A lot of times it's like a VA loan, an FHA loan, or a grant that they may pull out, or they may call out some safety issues, like no handrail in the basement, or some peeling paint that they want fixed before they'll allow it to close. So then buyers and sellers are both initialing that they understand how that works, and that is not, that will be like a lender's inspection and repair amendment that will be submitted. It's not anything that has to be done in 14 days. The appraiser actually has 21 days to do that. And then you have your different types of loans. So you're going to pick whichever loan, and you're going to fill out all of the terms of that loan. So let's just say it's a conventional loan. If they're putting 10% down, then we're actually asking for 90% commitment from the bank of the purchase price. Most of them are fixed unless the lender says it's an initial variable. And then the interest rate, unfortunately, is going up. So I'm going to put 5.5 there. Let's just say it's a traditional 30-year loan, but if it was a 10-year loan, you would put that there too. So 30 years of amortization, and let's just say there are no buyer points. So it'd be 0 if there's no buyer points. And then you're going to put no on any other type of financing that they're not getting. Now, if they're getting an IDA grant, let's say, then that is going to also be a yes, because it's a financing program. So they're getting a conventional loan, but they're also getting an IDA grant. Then you're just going to put the type of grant. It could be an ILFI grant, whatever it is. I always make this date match this date, because if the loan is done, then the grant, they should have already been approved for that grant at the same time. So I always match those dates on here. If it's an FHA, you'd fill out that. If it's a VA, if it's a USDA, otherwise sometimes known as a rural development loan. Mortgage assumption, we really don't do those yet, but these rates keep going up. We may end up doing them before we know it. Contract for deed. So we're just saying no to all the ones that we're not filling out and yes to the ones that we are. And if you have any questions, pick up that phone and call your lender and say, I don't know what this is. A lot of times I have to call like on an FHA and say, hey, are they going to have an origination fee? Is it going to be part of the purchase price? Are there any buyer points? Just ask them all these questions and they'll tell you what to put in those blanks. And then, of course, your signatures. Now the amendments for some of the other questions. If it was an appraisal, remember I just told you they have 21 days. So it spells it out right there. Every single one of these amendments spells out exactly what the terms are. Like you have 14 days to have a buyer's inspection. Here is where you're going to put your additional inspections. So let's say they have a pool and I want the pool inspected and I want the fireplace and chimney inspected. You can also add like windows. If you didn't have a chance to open and shut all the windows, you're not sure if they're all working, you can add that in. And that would be an additional inspection that you would want to add to a repair amendment if things came up on it. And then your buyers, this is an important conversation to have right here while you're talking to your buyers. I always spend a lot of time on this page because if you set the bar here, you won't have trouble when you get that inspection. as we all know, home inspections have pages and pages of, I won't even call them issues. A lot of times they're just suggestions or maintenance items. And if a buyer doesn't understand that, they will think, or someone will tell them, their aunt or their grandma or somebody will say, they have to bring that house up to code before they can sell it to you. Everything has to be up to code, and it does not. So it actually specifically says that you do not have to have things brought up to code. It also goes through some of the things that people try to get a seller to pay for that are considered maintenance items, like torn screens, fogged windows. And like I said, if you see some of those items when you're walking through the house, when you write the offer, if there's things they really want done, then you could always ask for that with the offer. You could always say, we'll pay you this much if you're going to fix that. We noticed that 3 of the windows are fogged up because they've lost their seal. My buyers really want those fixed in order to give you $200,000 for this house. So just get it all done ahead of time. What the home inspection is for is really, it's a get to know your house. It is for them to understand where the water lines come into the house and to have everything checked to make sure they understand exactly how everything works. And then the inspector should be giving them all sorts of maintenance hints and things that they would do if they own the house, just your best practices on owning a house and how the house is working. And then at the same time, they're checking for defects. So they're going to see some things that are not what we consider contractual items, but they're going to point them out, and they should. They're supposed to point out everything. So they're going to point out a crack in the sidewalk that can be a tripping hazard, but that does not mean that it falls into our conditions of being able to say, we're not buying the house if you don't fix it, Mr. Seller. So this really explains that to them. And you need to be real careful as you're talking to your buyers to go over that very carefully with them. And then they have to initial that you went over that with them. So they're actually initialing, we had this conversation, and I understand that there's going to be items on this report that I do not have the right to back out of the contract or to even request in a repair amendment. So that's super important. Here it says that unless the buyer and seller mutually agree within 5 days after submission on how and by whom these items will be remedied, then the buyer has 2 days to terminate the contract. So you have 5 days. So let's just say today, Monday, I submit a repair amendment to a listing agent, and it has, 7 things on there that the buyer really wants fixed in order to purchase the home. So today is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday rolls around, and we do not have that. We do not have that worked out. We're still arguing back and forth because it falls on a Saturday. It's going to go to Monday because of that. What I read earlier on performance. So then, say Monday, we still don't have it figured out. My buyer only has Monday and Tuesday to get out of the contract. Otherwise, they're accepting the house as is. So I've had situations where they say, it's been like 14 days. I did the repair amendment, I turned it in, and I just never heard anything back. Well, you kind of missed your window to get out of the contract. So watch that on the buyer side as well as the seller side. Also, please don't take 5 days to respond when you're a listing agent, because it says that you have 5 days to mutually agree. It's not fair on the very end of the 5th day to come back and say, we're not going to do this, this, and this, but we will do that and that, because now you've kind of backed the buyer into a corner where they're either saying yes or no. You don't have that time to actually go back and forth and say, what if we did this, or what if you could do that? And that's kind of what it's all about. So I would say, personally, you should never go more than 3 days without responding. That would give you 3 days after you receive the repair amendment to get some bids, talk to your seller, figure out some things, and then always remember that you do have to agree by whom. So don't just assume that his Uncle Harry is going to come and do all the repairs without running that past the buyer as well, that, hey, he has an uncle that's really handy and he's going to come do these repairs. Is that okay with you? Because there are certain buyers that may say, no, I want a real electrician to do this. So you want to go back and forth and mutually agree on that. And I suggest that you actually write on the repair amendment who is doing the work and have everyone initial so that there's no fights at the end. And that pretty much spells out that pretty well. Then we have like our home warranty. The home warranty would be like at whose expense. Let's say we're asking the seller to pay for it. Then you're going to put here the company or the type of warranty that you want. So we'll say Home Warranty Inc. And then whatever the price is of it. I believe it is $580 right now, if I remember correctly. And then who's ordering it? Because some of these companies do give that $100 kickback depending on who orders it. Decide right now, I want to order it or I want the listing agent to order it. If I post the listing agent, then the listing agent needs to get it ordered. And if it's the buyer's agent, then it goes there. Pretty simple. Mold inspection amendment. It does spell it out pretty clear. You have 14 days. Again, a lot of times I only do mold if the home inspector finds an area that we didn't see that they think needs to be tested. So again, don't wait till the 13th day to have your home inspection, because now you need to call in a mold inspector and they have to send that off to a lab. They're not going to do that in one day. You're going to need at least 3 days for them to do that. So if you put yes for mold, you want to definitely have that home inspection done within 10 days so that you can have time to have a mold inspected and have it sent to the lab and back. Because on the 14th day, you need to have your lab reports. And it's not okay to just send or to just request mold remediation because the home inspector saw what looks like mold. It does need to be tested and proven what type of mold it is and have a lab result in order to ask for mold remediation. Radon inspection, same thing. You're going to want to have the test there to say, whether or not it's too high. If it's too high, you need that done within 14 days as well, so you can submit that with your repair amendment. A survey, if you're going to do a survey, it can be at either the seller or the buyer's expense. And they do have a couple different types of survey here as well. So you just need to decide at that point in time what you're getting and who's paying for it so that everyone's clear right up front. Septic and well. There are certain counties, I know Tazewell County is one of them, that you cannot change hands without the septic and well being inspected and brought up to code. So there is no waiving that because you do have to have it done in that county. It is a county law that before it can change hands, it doesn't even matter if you're giving the house to your son or your grandson. It does have to be inspected in order to switch hands. This here explains that the buyer acknowledges that the buyer's agent must be present in order for them to attend any inspections. So if they want to go, my buyers go at the end of an inspection. Not everyone does it that way. I usually have a home inspection. I let the home inspector have the house for a bit by himself so he can concentrate and go through his whole list. And then we come for the last hour of the inspection so that he can walk the buyer through, show them everything about the house that he's noticed, and kind of go over any issues that he's discovered together so that we can both lay our eyes on it. But I need to be there. I can't just send my buyer to meet the home inspector. I have to be there with them. And the buyer is initialing that so that the buyer knows that they don't need to just show up without you. That happens sometimes. Buyers say, oh, well, the inspector said he was going to go at 9. And so I decided to go and see how he was doing. Well, they need to kind of acknowledge that they cannot be at that house in the premises or really in the yard. They cannot be there without you there. So that's basically them acknowledging that. And that is the end of our amendments. Now there's a few more on page 5 that I'm not going to go through today. We'll do that at a different time, but there is an amendment for each one of these. So like I said, there's a new construction amendment. There's subject to sale and closing amendment. Each one of these, if there's a short sale, there's an amendment for it. So if you have a condo, you're going to want to do the condo association amendment because it really explains how that works when you need to be accepted into a condo association. But all of those are separate amendments. So anything that's marked yes here, you should have an amendment for it. And that is it for the Peoria contract. If you have any questions at all, please give me a call. My number is 309-241-2322, or shoot me an email. Megan can always help as well, but I'm pretty much covering the Peoria contracts, and she's pretty much covering the Bloomington contracts. So just let us know if we can help you. Have a great day.